The March to the Sea has come down to us as an act of savage brutality, perpetrated by one of the great villains of American history. Just the mention of William Tecumseh Sherman's name conjures images of burning cities, ransacked plantations, and terror-stricken women and children. Even after the passage of 150 years and dozens of scholarly books on the general and his march, most conversations about Sherman continue to generate more heat than light. In this article, we will discuss the legend that has grown up around Sherman's march, and how we can separate the myth from facts. During 1864, from November 15th to December 21st, Union General William T. Sherman led 60,000 soldiers from Atlanta to Savannah, Georgia. This trek was 285 miles and was nicknamed the March to the Sea. It was meant to scare Georgia civilians into abandoning the Confederate causes. He didn't destroy any of the towns on their way, but they stole food and livestock from the people who tried to fight back. They also burnt those people's houses and barns. The Yankees were not only fighting hostile armies, but a hostile people. Sherman explained as a result they needed to make old and young, rich and poor feel the hard hand of war. This particular march was believed to be the most destructive campaign against the civilian population during the Civil War. Sherman abandoned his supply line and marched across Georgia to the Atlantic Ocean to prove to the Confederate population that its government could not protect the people from invaders. He practiced psychological warfare and believed that by marching an army across the state, he would demonstrate to the world that the Union had the power that the Confederacy could not resist. This may not be war, but rather statesmanship. After Sherman's forces captured Atlanta on September 2, 1864, Sherman spent several weeks making preparations for a change of base to the coast. We are not only fighting armies, but a hostile people. I know that this recent movement of mine through Georgia has an excellent effect in this respect. Thousands who have been deceived by their lying papers into the belief that they were whipped all the time realize the truth and have no appetite for a repetition of the same experience. Finally gained permission. Although he had a delay until after Election Day, Sherman divided his approximately 60,000 troops into roughly two wings. The right side was under Oliver O. Howard. Peter J. Osterhaus commanded the 15th Corps, and Francis P. Blair, Jr. commanded the 17th Corps. The left wing was commanded by Henry W. Slocum, with the 14th Corps under Jefferson C. Davis and the 20th Corps under Alphonse S. Williams. Judson Kilpatrick led the cavalry. Sherman had about 2,500 supply wagons and 600 ambulances. Before the army left Atlanta, the general issued an order outlining the rules of the march, but soldiers often ignored the restrictions on foraging. General Sherman's troops capturing Atlanta was a remarkable triumph because Atlanta was a railroad hub and the industrial center of the Confederacy. It had munition factories, shops, and warehouses that kept the Confederate army supplied with food, weapons, and other goods. It stood between the Union Army and two of its most prized targets, the Gulf of Mexico to the west and Charleston to the east. It was a symbol of Confederate pride and strength, and its fall made even the most loyal Southerners doubt that they could win the war. After General John Bell Hood abandoned Atlanta, he moved the Confederate Army of Tennessee outside the city to recuperate from the previous campaign. In early October, he began a raid toward Chattanooga, Tennessee, to draw Sherman back over ground the two sides had fought for since May. But instead of tempting Sherman back to battle, Hood turned his army west and marched into Alabama, abandoning Georgia to the Union forces. Apparently, Hood hoped that if he invaded Tennessee, Sherman would be forced to follow. However, Sherman had anticipated this strategy and had sent Major General George H. Thomas to Nashville to deal with Hood, which Georgia cleared of the Confederate army. Sherman, facing only scattered cavalry, was free to move south. Sherman's scorched earth campaign began on November 15th when he cut the last telegraph wire that linked him to his superiors in the north. He left Atlanta in flames and pointed his army south. No word would be heard from him for the next 5 weeks. Unbeknownst, His enemy, Sherman's objective, was the port of Savannah. His army of 65,000 cut a broad swath and it lumbered towards its destination. Today, many, especially in the South, remember Sherman as a cruel man who burnt the homes of crops and Georgians, while others in the North would consider General Sherman a hero for liberating the South from its crimes for using slavery. The South still hasn't recovered, and debates continue to rage today whether he should be considered a war criminal or just a general who knew how to end war. We are not only fighting armies, but hostile people. And I know that this recent movement of mine through Georgia has had an excellent effect in this respect. Thousands who have been deceived by their lying papers in the belief that we were being whipped all the time realize the truth and have no appetite for a repetition of the same experience.